Clay is like an earthen pot. In the hands of a great porter, clay returns to clay. Arise in the land of the living. A yakubibanabantu production.
Yakubibanabantu, mutoto wa kibantu, bana muntu. Bana
Rise of a nation, sounds from a liberated Bantu.
Yakubibanabantu, mutoto wa kibantu.
All praises to NINI MWENE.
KEMBO, KEMBO, TATA na NZAMBI, Yamazulu, MPUNGU TULENDO, NINI na NINI SOMANLDA, NGAI, MURUNGU, MWENE, NYAGA. Depending on where you are, I greet you. Nusiemi, Betoabumbote, Banabayisolele, Molweni Abantoana Abangoni, Moriega Shiana Shiangai Nakenda Moyoru, Mpo Salama Watoto wa Mungu. Sawubona abantwana babao weto oswema zulwini. Yes, it's that time we sit and rightly divide the word of truth to the uncolonized mind. The truth sets you free. Lie. Lie, dada yangai lie, lie, dada yangai lie. Let's get right into it. The author and the inventor of the biblical Moses, my people, studied in Kingipiti. I tell you this because Egyptians did not use burnt bricks to build the city of Ramses. Not even mud bricks were used, but stones to build this new capital. The burnt bricks were used in Roman times for city construction. Also the use of camels. Egyptians did not use camels until 40 AD, those in Kingipiti. It was introduced as a way of transport by the Romans. And this forms the premise of what I want us to look at today. The truth sometimes can be perplexing, especially when we have cognitive dissonance. We are afraid to process what takes out of our comfort zone. Do not let my appearance fool you. Those who understand what I'm about to do. Lie. The Egyptian religion had become so powerful over the ancient world that Rome had to do something to contain it. And better, to replace it with something they could control. However, at this point, we've only been able, from the books, to gather two sources. The Egyptian historian Menato. Menato was a Greco-Egyptian priest in the temple of Heliopolis. He was born in Sebintonos in the Delta. During the 3rd century AD, his Egyptian history divided the rulers into dynasties or ruling houses. That's why the pharaoh represents the great house. The term pharaoh represents the great house, but not the actual title, which was Nisu. Nisu was the title of royalty. He had access to many sources, which no longer exist. We know what they did in Alexandria, such as temple records, but also included legends and stories. As a result, we are going to decipher whatever he presented to us. Although I've not been able to find any full text by Manetho for obvious reasons. We only have short sections of text and a few references in the writings of that liar, Josephus, Flavius, or Sextus Julius Africanus in the 3rd century, Eusebius of Caesarea, George Syncellos, a Byzantine historian, and our knowledge cannot come from what they have presented us. So by the guidance of the ancestors, by the Ngolo for the KEMBO of TATA, our father in Yamazulu, he who dwells on the mountains, he who is to be looked upon as a jasper and sardine stone. May the truth be spoken, may the truth set us free. The first historic event, you remember in last week's teaching, we talked about the car. Now, the historical event of the two brothers, Ka Mose and Ah Mose, that is K-A and Mose and A-H, Ah Mose, the Theban princes and the struggle against the Hyksos. We've been throwing around the word Hyksos for quite some times, and their final expulsion out of Egypt. We need to know these people. We need to know why the Bible was, exactly why the Bible was written, and exactly why we have been led to do this. And I'm going to do it in a way that I'm going to pose questions to you. I'm going to present facts. You're going to verify Banabeto, and then we are going to have a discussion after that. The name Moses was actually an Egyptian name, which means the legitimate heir or son of. Well, the Bible failed to mention the name of the Pharaoh or most of the kings of Kingipiti, ? Why the Bible fails to mention the name of Pharaoh's daughter who picks out Mose, Massa, out of the water? We are decoding the esoteric book, which is basically astrotheology, compacted by Greco-Roman writers. Why the Septuagint? Why the 72? And why had it to be written in Egypt? Is it because the only reference they had was in Kingipiti? I pose the question to you, my people. No basket red can survive in the Nile. These experiments have been done. All baskets with baby dolls drowned. However, there's a famous story of the holy Isis when she hid her son, Holy Horus or Horus, from his evil uncle Seth. Seth, Satan, does that sound familiar? The resurrection, the rising of the sun resurrects, the flooding of the Nile so that it would rebirth, because there were, remember I told you there were 3 seasons. And when the moon would be in its lower quarter, what they would call Achnoa, the Nile would flood, bringing silt from upper Nile to lower Nile. This flooding was known as Achnoa. That is where you get your baptism from, because water has to drown the creation so that it can be rebirthed. And that is where you get your baptism from. It's just a plagiarized version of the true spirituality of Muntu. Okay. Now, I'm not here to challenge any dynamic. I'm just here to raise pertinent questions to those that believe, at the detriment of myself. But as I've always told you, Banabeto, if you're going to play with a crocodile, then you better bring an elephant to the playing field. Right. Why would the princess of Egypt, unmarried, adopt a foreign child in the first place? But let us assume that her kind human heart was to save the poor child from the Nile. But how did Moses' sister Miriam, an Egyptian name from Meriamen, gain access to the palace or the princess? Maybe its fate and the will of NGAI. I wasn't there, but let's ask ourselves the pertinent questions. The Old Testament mentioned that slaves burnt bricks to build the new store city, a practice that was introduced during the Roman period in Egypt. They used dried mud bricks, not burnt them. And the city of Pyramid was built by stones, not even mud bricks. The archaeological site is there. Take a trip, confirm. Why would the prince of Egypt run away for killing an Egyptian foreman? Surely his adoptive mother, the princess, daughter in the house of Pharaoh, Anisu, would protect him, if not the Pharaoh himself. Unless in a democratic country, which was not the way of monarchs, no one was above the law, and murder was not acceptable in a civilized society such as ancient Kingipit, who are the laws far more advanced than the so-called 10 commandments. Yes, we know of the 47 laws of Ma'at. Because it's either you summarize 47 expand them into 614 as the Pharisees would do. That is a question I raise to you, Barnabas. I am just a messenger. Moses' story tells us he escaped to the Midianite tribes, can be found in the classical stories of Egypt from the Middle Kingdom in the famous story of Sinuhi. That is S-I-N-U-H-Y, Sinuhi. He set me at the head, and this I quote, he set me at the head of his children. He married me to his eldest daughter. He let me choose for myself of his land, of the best that was his, of his border with another land. It was a good land called Ya. Figs were in it and grapes. It had more wine than water. Abundant was its honey, plentiful its oils. All kinds of fruit were on its trees. Barley was there and emmer, and no end of cattle of all kinds, much as came to me because of the love of me, for he had made me chief of a tribe in the best part of his land. Loaves were made for me daily, and wine as daily fare, cooked meat, roast fowl, as well as desert game. For they snared for me and laid it before me. In addition to the catch of my hounds, many sweets were made for me and milk dishes of all kinds. Banabeto, please, also that the other parts of the same story was later copied for the story of David and Goliath. In the same manner, which is more proof that they copied these stories from famous Kingipiti stories and classical tales. And here is the example. There came a hero of Retenu to challenge me in my tent. A champion was he without peer. He was subdued. He had subdued it all. He said he would fight with me. He planned to plunder me. He meant to seize my cattle at the behest of his tribe. The ruler conferred with me, and I said, I do not know him. I am not his ally, and I could not walk about in his camp. Have I ever opened his back rooms or climbed over the fence? It is envy because he sees me doing your commissions. I am indeed like a stray bull in a strange herd, whom the bull of the herd charges, whom the longhorn attacks. Is an inferior beloved, he becomes a superior. No Asiatic makes friends with a Delta man. Get that point? Caucasian, Caucasoid and the Asians. No Asiatic makes friends with a Delta man. We are talking about the Nile Delta that would make papyrus cleave to the mountain. And what would make papyrus cleave to the mountain? If a bull loves combat, should a champion bull retreat for fear of being equaled? If he wishes to fight, let him declare his wish. If there is a God who does not know what he has ordained, and a man who does not know how it will be. And at night I strung my bow, sorted my arrows, practiced with my dagger, polished my weapons. When it dawned, Retenu came. It had assembled its tribe. It had gathered its neighboring peoples. It was intent on this combat. He came towards me when I waited. Having placed myself near him, every heart burned for me. The women jabbered. All hearts ached for me, thinking, is there another champion who could fight him? He raised his battle axe and shields, while his armful of missiles, projectiles, fell towards me. Sound familiar? David and Goliath? Well, let's keep checking. Then his missiles fell towards me. When I had made his weapons attack me, I let his arrows pass me by without effect, one following the other. Then when he charged me, I shot him, my arrow sticking in his neck. He screamed, he fell on his nose. I slew him with his axe. I raised my war cry over his back, while every Asiatic shouted. I gave praise to Mont, while his people mourned for him. Their ruler, Amuneshi, took me in his arms. Ra, as I had explained in the community page, Banabeto, is Hebrew for evil. But that does not necessarily make it evil, because what is, as it is above, so is it below. He said he will ascend to the throne. He will be like the Most High. I don't know if you're getting this point. But I continue asking the questions. Why on earth would impoverished slaves have a festival for 70 days of wine, dine and dance? The Egyptian masters must have been too kind to let them have such a feast and not work. It is mentioned in the esoteric book, is it not? Moses, the prince of Kingipiti, why did he need his brother to translate from Egyptian into a Semitic language to explain to people who lived in Kingipiti for more than 400 years and all spoke the tongue of Kingipiti and had Kingipiti names? Perhaps their Kingipiti language was washed away while crossing the Red Sea, or it was forgotten while being lost in Sinai by Moses and his followers for 40 years. Exodus 3:21-22. Of course, I was going to make reference to the esoteric book because that is where you, my people, choose to draw all your spirituality from. A book given to you by your enslaver. Now you want to make it your own. You know, in law, we used to call that conversion. That's why they call you converts. You're just taking what is theirs and converting it. The elements of theft. There's the stealing and there's the conversion. That's why all Christians are converts. All Christians have stolen. And that is why we in the awakening affirm, I have not stolen. And NGAI gave the people favor in the sight of those of King Gipiti, and with that every woman will ask his neighbor for silver and gold for sojourn in King Gipiti. Those of Kingipiti must have been too kind to their neighbor slaves who were in such a hurry to leave Kingipiti. The 10 plagues can be read in Egyptian fairy tales such as the story of Sea Osiris and the sealed letter, when a battle of magic between the famous Egyptian 10-year-old boy named Osiris, son of the famous magician and prince of Egypt, son of King Ramses II, Prince Stena Kaimose, against the giant Egyptian magician. I read again. The 10 plagues can be read in Egyptian fairy tales, such as the story of Osiris and the sealed letter, when the battle of magic between the famous Egyptian 10-year-old boy named Osiris, son of the famous magician, and prince of Kingipiti, son of King Ramses II, Prince Stena Kaimose, against the giant Ethiopian magician. Ethiopia is Kush. Where was Maza sojourned if he had escaped? Let's connect the dots. Let not cognitive dissonance prevent the tipping of the consciousness of Muntu. I acknowledge the existence of the one who was, is, and is to come, who my people call NGAI, MURUNGU, MWENE, NYAGA, he who dwells on the mountain, who my people in the south know as NINI SOMANLDA, those in Central Tanateru or the Congo Diantotela, know him as TATA NZAMBI. My fan people know him as Nzambe, Nkulu, Keduri Kenene, the ancient of days, the Mogai of the melanated ones, the one who's personified as the sun because he travels in a chariot of fire. May our minds be led to the place they were conditioned not to go. You may not see these facts because deep in your subconscious mind, the enemy has become the deity. And you cannot differentiate this without the rituals to free you from this. We call it Watahiki or Christian. Ask those who have gone through it, they'll tell you. But because of cognitive dissonance, we are not willing to go beyond where our mind was conditioned not to go. Because of fear of the unknown, but the fear of the unknown is a liberation of what is known. And even more strange, they went up armed out of the land of Kingipiti, 600,000 armed men with their families, only to be chased by Pharaoh himself and a mere 600 chariots. Exodus 14, manned by 2 charioteers, gives us a total of only 1,200 men. 1,200 men, charioteers and bowmen, against a formidable armed force of 600,000 men, of which at least they would have had a minimum of 100,000 capable fighting men. Wow, I'm astonished, Banabeto. If the Bible is the truth, then brand me a liar. It contains element of truth, only if you know what you're looking at. Wow, the Egyptians must have had also lost their mind to chase after them. Only maybe the Egyptian army was armed with formidable weapons that are unheard of until today. Maybe. However, we know that the population in Kingipiti during this period could not have been in the hundreds of millions. Egypt's population at Ramses' time must have, and this is just a figure I'm throwing out there. I'm not a numbers person. Just over 2 million. So when the Israelites, Israel, those who Israel to fight El, the mighty one, left King Gipiti and wandered in the desert. Why bother? They could have taken it by force. The Egyptian army of Ramses II numbered maximum in one big war, as in the Battle of Kadesh. This is, let's reference, just 20,000, not even 100,000. The Egyptians would have been outnumbered 60-1. The crossing of the Sea of Reed and the opening of the Sea of Reeds, its two halves can be read in the old fairy tale from ancient King Gipiti called The Lotus Flower and the Magic Book of Princess Ahura. Why would Moses carry the royal scepter, only held by a king or a co-regent, and keeps it with himself and show it to the people? Was he a king or perhaps a co-regent, Smenkare? But no prince can have access to the kingly scepter. Fact. Where did 2 million people wandering in Sinai, Exodus 13, who are armed and reasonable, too rich for impoverished slaves, come from? Were they 60,000 inhabitants who lived and later exiled from the city of Akhenaten? We've seen Akhenaten bringing monotheism in the time of Yosefu. Were they the 60,000 inhabitants who lived and later exiled from the city of Akhenaten to the city of the lepers by order of the new military generals in King Gipiti during the end of the Akhenaten period under the new appointment boy king Tut Ankh Amun? Moses the astronomer, why was he lost in Sinai for 40 years? With his extreme knowledge and the expertise and education in King Gipiti and those who were with him. The tempest still of King Ahmose I, found in the Karnak temple in Thebes. King Ahmose I, who liberated the north of Egypt from the rule of the Hyksos and finally expelled them from King Gipiti, has few things in common with the stories of the Bible. Let's get right into it. The steel of King Ahmose I. Now then, the gods declared their discontent. The gods caused the sky to come in a tempest of rain with darkness in the western region, and the sky being unleashed without cessation, louder than the cries of the masses, more powerful than, while the rain raged on the mountains, louder than the noise of the cataract, which is at Elephantine. Don't the biblical plagues have a similar theme? A thick darkness without the least light spread itself over the Egyptians, whereby their sight being obstructed and their breathing hindered by the thickness of the air, under a terror lest they be swallowed up by the dark cloud. Hail was sent down from Yamazulu, heaven, and such hail it was as the climate of King Gipiti had never suffered before. The hail broke down their boughs laden with fruit. We go to the tempest still, and one of them reads as follows. Then His Majesty began to provide them with silver, with gold, with copper, with oil, and every bolt of cloth that could be desired. Then His Majesty made himself comfortable inside the palace. In the Bible, an exact equivalent of the description above is found. This is the offering which you shall take of them: gold, silver, and brass, copper, and cloth of blue, and purple, and scarlet, and fine linen, oil for the light, spices for anointing oil, and for sweet incense, and let them make a palace sanctuary that I may dwell among them. Josephus Flavius, Jewish Antiquities reads, the Theban pharaoh attacked the walls of Avaris with an army of 480,000 men and endeavored to reduce the Hyksos to submission by siege. Despairing of achieving his object, he concluded a treaty under which they were all, listen, he concluded a treaty under which they were all to evacuate Kingipiti and go whither they would unmolested. Upon these terms, no fewer than 240,000 families with their possessions left Kingipiti and traversed the deserts to Syria, later explained as being Jerusalem. You see where they, because it doesn't make sense that warriors in a Tana Teru, where the kings of Egypt would come for the 3-day death in Mount Kenya, which was known as Tanateru, the land of the gods, for their initiation, because the 3-day death is where you find he died for 3 days. Certain rituals would be administered. And I tell you, these rituals, for 3 days, you will get very sick. Sick to the point of you feel like you're dying. I rest my case, Vanaveto. They would come to Tanateru, and then we are told that the same Abantu who empowered the kings, the pharaohs, the great houses would be taken into captivity. No, these Hyksos, these people in captivity, these people that have wanted to be a special people, these people that have a deity, a murderous deity, you know, a deity who orders the murder of women and children. These people that are, since time in history, they've always wanted to show how special and a better race they are. These people. But the biblical text said the same event. Speak now in the ears of the Israelites, and let every man borrow of his neighbor, those in Kingipiti, jewels of silver and jewels of gold. And the SOMANLDA gave the Israelites favor in the sight of Kingipiti, so that they lent them such things as they required, and they spoiled the Egyptians. The Ark of the Covenant, Manangi, taken by the fighting Kabiru from Axum. A replica is made during the what do we call Nguondune, the Crusades. They wanted it, but now this is the part we need to reason about this Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant, a holy vehicle housing the 2 tablets. Why was it, and why would it be made in an Egyptian design? Like, look at the wings. Aren't those the representation of gods in Egypt? And if the biblical timeline is anything to go by, then doesn't it try and fit an exact timeline? I'm just asking questions, Bernadette. If you seek the answers, they are there. Why was it an Egyptian design adorned with Egyptian images and Egyptian godly designs? Egyptian goddesses with wings around the box? And you call those angels? It has nowhere occurred to you that flight and the feather of Ma'at that is weighed against the heart. Your heart must be lighter than a feather. That's why we speak of light-hearted people. The tabernacle was nothing but the mobile Egyptian temple, I tell you, used by the Pharaoh while leaving King Gipiti for war, or visits abroad, or during military campaigns, and while laying siege to cities, as King Ahmose the First surely did outside the gates of Avaris, the capital city of the Hyksos. Read it, and then they tell you of Gibeon. The siege. Come on, Banabeto. It's not rocket science. If at all you're willing to go to the place your mind was led beyond. And if you're having difficulties, then connect with your ancestry. There are rituals that can be done. Whether you call them rituals, no, I'd call them my culture. You reject them, I tell you, Gudia Gomi, Dehoragione Mahoya. A jab from the ancestors is not appeased with prayers. The 10 Commandments, what language was it written in? Aramaic, Hebrew, Canaanite, or perhaps Egyptian? Since the mass of the Exodus only spoke and wrote Egyptian, Hebrew was not yet invented. No, until the year 600 BC. Anyway, new evidence in Egypt is emerging of the development of the Kabiru, Hebrew written words from Hyksos period. So enter the Hyksos, enter Kabiru, enter all this confusion. And the Hyksos were from what is modern day Iraq. Oh. The 10 Commandments. Why 2 out of 10 are adultery, women and neighbor? Ancient Egypt had the 42 holy commandments of Ma'at, which rape is the second highest sin after murder. Something the Bible, the Torah, and the Quran does not mention. Or does the Almighty One not recognize rape as sin? And that is why they had to expand into the 6:14. I have not committed murder, neither have I bid anyone to slay on my behalf. I have not committed rape, neither have I forced anyone to commit fornication. Why was slavery and rape were not considered as a sin in the Bible, huh? Especially slavery. Otherwise, what was the point of the Exodus, huh? And the freeing of slavery, and what was that God trying to prove by freeing the slaves out of King Gipit? For what purpose does it serve, especially that they have committed the very same act of enslavement and genocide to other tribes? Out of the 2 million people who left King Gipit, not one was able to write about these spectacular events, huh? Nor have any written documents, yet we are told of the scribes and priests among them. And they just carried their stories and Bible through the oral tradition, even when the mythical Solomon, now identified as King Amenhotep III, was busy building these great mystical buildings that have not been found nor exist, and not one shred of evidence whatsoever in the Negev. Why did Moses, an Egyptian prince, why Moses, an Egyptian prince, and I emphasize this, needed his brother, who was not ordered to be killed by the king of Egypt, as the brother Moses, for a known reason, as a speaker before Pharaoh, to ask for the freedom of his people. What language does he actually speak, if not Shemitic? Hebrew or Egyptian? Yet he spoke fluent Egyptian since he was raised all his life in King Gipiti as a prince. We are told he was a stammerer. Or maybe he spoke Latin. Where is the evidence for 2 million people who allegedly escaped from King Gipiti, lived and wandered in the Sinai for 40 years? Some evidence: graves, water, wells, food supplies, animal stock, feces, maybe some broken chariots, wheels, objects of settlements. Were these people kept on moving around? Anything? No, nothing has been found in the dry desert. In Sinai, yet or never, as it was excavated very well. They've spent years excavating. Another question: why Moses, Moses' brother Aaron, the new high priest, changed his mind and made the golden calf goddess Hathor for the Israelites to worship and dance after Moses left them for 40 days to have a meeting with God on top of a mountain in order to receive the 2 engraved tablets of the 10 commandments? Did they all lose their faith and went back to their own Egyptian worship of the old gods? When Moses came back, he was so furious, he broke the holy 2 stone tablets and destroyed the statue of Hathor and murdered and slayed 3,000 of his own people. But not his brother. He forgave him and afterward disappeared for another 40 days to ask for a duplicate of the 2 stone tablets from God. Why God took too long to make these tablets? It is known that an Egyptian scribe can carve and polish 2 tablets within 4 days. Exodus 12 mentioned of Egyptian priests that left with Moses, where the atonist priests. Exodus 12 mentions of an Egyptian priest that left with Moses. Where are they? Atonist priests. Their names in the Bible were Mary, Re, Lawi, Penhase, Mary, Maya, Bint, Aneth, Korah, Datham, Abiram, and On, son of Pelet, which are very Egyptian names. The second Exodus during the time of King Akhenaten. It was Pharaoh, it was the great house of Horemhab and his generals who destroyed the Akhenaton royal family and erased all their names, cities, statues, tombs, and the names of all the 4 pharaohs from Akhenaten. Semenkare, Tutankhamun, and I, and it was forbidden to even utter their names of Akhenaton or the name of Aton. What is the basic unit in science? Is it not the atom? So could we say that the energy that gives life comes from the atom, or Athene, or the Ancient of Days, if you prefer? You decide. It was punishable by death, persecution. That is why in the Jewish worship, they don't mention Adoni, but Yehovah. Adoni means my Lord. Aton is the same name in the Bible, yet not allowed to be pronounced by the readers of the Bible. Instead, they read it as Yehovah, because it became forbidden to mention the name of Aton or Akhenaton after the return of the old reforms of King Gipiti, bringing back the old mystery religion. Also, Adonai means in Hebrew, my Lord. I, my, and Adonai means Aton, Lord. But in this, you have to understand, if you do not understand the etymology of the words, you might get lost. Why was it punishable to mention a king who had brought monotheism, the belief in the one, in the mighty one, who was personified as the sun? There was no sun worship, because that is what the human mind will do. It wants to associate belief with sight. But faith, vis-a-vis confidence in the Creator, is not a matter of sight. Is it not written, if the eye is one, that should be in, yeah, the light of the body is the eye. Therefore, when the eye is single, the whole body also is full of light. Wasn't the sun always depicted as the eye with a circle of light around it? It's a lesson. It may confuse you, but I hope to liberate you. You remember in the camps, in the Hebrew roots movement, we would say, Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Please note, if a man called Tutu in Egypt, his name will be pronounced Dudu in Canaan or Syria. The T becomes a D. Shema, Sema Yisolele. Atene, Ariomwe, Atene, Atene, Arengai, Atene, Ari Omwe, Echad. I hope that didn't fly by you, Wanabeto. Menatho, I mentioned him at the beginning. The Egyptian historian in 300 BC wrote of 2 expulsions from King Gipiti. The first one, the shepherd, foreigners, the Hyksos in the 16th century BC, and the foreigners and lepers, that is the followers of Athene. There are 2 expulsions from King Gipiti, but only one is capitalized. Foreigners and lepers, the followers of Aton, the followers of Athene, Okenera Athene, the followers of the Ancient of Days. In Kikuyu, Tene is ago. That is where you find Aro from. Nademodomoro. I have O in me because I follow the ways of Gai Wakire Nyaga. Murungu MWENE NYAGA. So nini na nini SOMANLDA, TATA na NZAMBI. Unkulunkulu. Oludumare. Nzambembe. Modimo. Moari. These are just titles towards his attributes. But what is he? The beginning. He who was, is, and is to come. the basic atom, or if you prefer, what they call the photon. This is science meets spirituality. But the spirituality predates the science. The science is just an explanation, a contracted explanation of the spirituality in a way that we can understand, in a way that we can relate. Why did Moses turn against his Midianite tribe? And he had them killed and had the rest enslaved. After all the help and hospitality they gave him, come on, and married one of their daughters. Huh? And the prince of Kingipiti became a simple shepherd, a job held by the women in most of the Bedouin tribes. In Numbers 31, in the Bible, tells the evil tale that 12,000 armed men sent by Moses, they slew all the males, the 5 leaders and all the male children, and all the women who are not virgins, and distributed all the rest of goods, and distributed the captured virgins who are Midianites, and dwelt among the 12 tribes. What a vengeance on the tribe of one's wife, huh? From a prophet sent by NGAI to free people from oppression and slavery. It's a Holocaust and genocide act, as some famous leaders, Hitler, did in modern history. That makes Moses the first war criminal in history, the biblical Moses. According to the Bible, I emphasize that. I put emphasis on that. Because your decolonized mind might take what I'm saying out of perspective and lose what I am saying. And you should actually, from my legal background, I tell you that in today's world, Moses would have been charged with crimes against humanity, genocide and ethnic cleansing, theft of private property, rape of virgin girls, murder of innocent civilians, the slaughter of non-combatant women, the slaughter of non-combatant young boy prisoners, the use of young girl prisoners as Israelite sex slaves. Everything that the Ma'at embodies, the truth and divine justice, is not exhibited in this esoteric book, and that does not make you question who is this deity that is being pushed down your throats. Because verily I know the deity I serve is Gaiwa Otheruna Odhingu. THAAYU, peace. Umuntu, kumuntu, kabantu. I am because you are, because we are. So would my creator be a genocidal maniac? What father raises up his children only to murder them? Just like their father, who was a murderer from the beginning. Connect the dots. Cognitive dissonance wants you to believe that this deity that was presented to you is your deity, because the enemy has become the deity in your subconscious mind. Anything that leads you toward the one of truth and justice, the creator of heaven and earth, is wrapped up in a neat bow that makes you think. Questioning these fallacies is actually sinning. And that is why the Ma'at are not orders, they are affirmations. You think they did not know that you would have, none of us is clean, none of us, none has achieved that cleanliness. because we live in a society that is triggered to cause. But should the balance come, should your heart be weighed, does the good outweigh the bad? Thus comes the laws of Ma'at. And they're not very different. There are reasons, because you see, what they took is what they did not understand about the intricacies of the spirituality. They took that and tried to map it in a way they could control it. Actually, giving you a taste, because your primordial consciousness will associate with this because it is encoded in your genetical makeup. But what you have is a genetically modified version. And the more you try to cling to this version, it becomes a rabbit hole. You'll keep digging up, digging up, digging up, digging up, digging up, all the while losing sight of what is in plain sight. Die, dada young guy, die, die, dada young guy, die, die, dada young guy, die. Kirenya lage there, kiro, kiro. Wanabeto, analyzing the story, one can see clearly evidence that a group of students lived and studied in Egypt and were all well acquainted with the above tales and literature of ancient Kingipiti and the mystery system of ancient Kingipiti, but were very bitter, angry, and envious of Kingipiti and those in Kingipiti in general, as some religious fundamentalists feel. Today, when they live or study in the USA or Europe, and they rebel against the social system and the advanced host nation and refuses to adopt or change, usually due to racism and discrimination by the advanced culture, as the Egyptians were, since they were famous for their arrogance and had no respect for no one who was not of Kingipiti. They referred to foreigners in their language, in the vocabulary, as barbarians, heathens. Example given to us by the harsh treatment that was given to Pythagoras when he was granted permission to learn in Egypt by King Amasis. Yes, Pythagoras of the Pythagoras theorem. This is where all this anger, they are scholars. One, because he would have been uncircumcised. I leave it at that. We never had hate. We just did not associate with what was not divinely tuned. These biblical scholars or students had a need to create a kind of confusing history for the enslaved people based on Kingipiti tales. That's why slavery became the norm with them. This was a premise. And that is the only reason behind the ambiguity of most of the biblical stories that had no logic or any kind of reality or any historical or archaeological proof, just simple fantastic fairy tales and some modern stories like The Lord of the Rings or Hollywood style movies in order. Yes, they've been long before Hollywood. This was their stage in order to influence the ignorant, the simple-minded. The more the fantastic the story is, the more they gained power. And they built up the national religious feeling over their own people. Hollywood would have made a better script. Tales to be told to the desert nomadic tribes who lived in the desert or primitive tribal community, as also the tales of 1001 Nights in the Middle East is still a great fascination among children as well as adults. It is evident, Banabeto, that the inventors of the story of Moses were not well informed in the dates and true facts of the time. Otherwise, they would have written a better convincing story. Now let the ancestors speak. Was Ramses the second, the pharaoh of the Exodus, since it was he who built a city after his name, as Akhenaton did in his new capital name the city of Akhenaten or Akeneri Athene? Oh, I'm sure if there's anybody that has studied the Egyptian tongue, they must be having a ball at this point, because I'm just connecting the tongue of King Gipiti to the Bantu tongue. Aye. Many Bible scholars recognize the conflict between Bible date of the Exodus and the Egyptian dates of the 18th dynasty. Thus, many of these Bible scholars shifted from the 18th dynasty to the 19th dynasty as the time of the Exodus, identifying Ramses II as the great house of the Exodus. Most Egyptologists who have researched their work and archaeologists date Ramses II reign from circa 1279 to 1213 BC. I'm not quite sure, but I think within that 1279 to 1213 BC. However, 1 Kings 6:1 says that 480 years separated Solomon's fourth year, 966 BC, from the Exodus in 1446 BC. Scholars who identify Ramses II as the great house of the Exodus consider the 480 years of 1 Kings 6:1 to only be 284 years, in order to date the Exodus in 1250 BC, in the middle of Ramses II long reign of 67 years. Ramses was a store city in Moses' day, not a capital city. The great house of Moses' birth built Ramses and Pithom as store cities. Exodus 1:11. Ramses, I'm not going to keep reading into the script. So if we get to a point that I mention a biblical reference, you might pause the video and just read, because I do not need to confirm what is already written, what you already have. I'm giving you information that you don't have, so that you may match that with what you have and stop following the white man's doctrine. Send that email that we may unlock your mind and you may free more people. Most of you don't even know how gifted you are. Most of you are very gifted, and you make what I do here look like child's play. But because of cognitive dissonance and alluding to biblical reference, yet the Bible is just extractions of stories of your people. I talked of Tanateru. I talked of Lower and Upper Egypt. So I'm making this connection. I'm not questioning anybody's beliefs. I am just planting the seed of truth. Whether you decide to water it, that's up to you, because I always tell you, Badabeto, what I present here, go verify. And if you find any inconsistency, please reach out. And if you find consistency, also reach out. Because if this is resonating with you, then your ancestors are speaking and they are waiting for you to do what needs to be done. Ask those who have done. I said I'll never waste time justifying the truth, because the truth defends itself. And the more I get into this truth, the more weird I'll get. But you think I'm going to come on this screen and present information that might be detrimental to my health and to the public and not be protected? Come on, call me, brand me whatever you want. But I practice the ancient ways. And they work for me. Zoan, not Ramses. Oh, sorry, I get carried. Sometimes some of you send very ill-advised messages to me. I am a son of Muntu. I walk in Ngolo. I rest my case. Ramses was a store city in Moses' day, not a capital city. Zoan, not be Ramses, is the capital of King Gibbet in the day of Moses. Numbers 13:22. I told you I'm going to break the esoteric code in this book if it kills me. You can send me all the threatening emails you want. You can hack into my systems. You can do all that, but you're not the one. It was not a conference call. Because I tell you, Banabeto, it's a struggle to bring this information to you with all the censorship. But my hope leans on the one who is above, because I say, Go kaera gayo reawere maire maigo owe murevi koyo otomana noge tumani orio kirinyaga twehererio magongo na mage. Nimitego mambete beri American. They have set traps before you, Banabeto, that none of you may arise. I am not the sharpest tool in the shed, but I've been given something that cuts, and it cuts deep. And sometimes I ask you, Banabeto, the only reason I'm able to come on the airwaves is because of you, your support, psychological, verbal, otherwise, when I get those beautiful emails. And I will be sharing one at the end of this broadcast. Ramses II reigned too long to be the Pharaoh of the Exodus. Pharaoh of the Exodus must have reigned less than 10 years. Ramses II reigned for 67 years. Merenta, of those, Ta. Merenta, the name was very important. And I'm going to be, consequently, I will be breaking down, because all these names you see in King Gibbet have their root in the Bantu tongue, and have proven severally. And I am in the process of breaking down the Herero language, because a lot of truth is to be found among the Nama Herero people. As the Agikoyo, as the Congo, it's a jigsaw puzzle that we need to connect and tip the consciousness scale. KEMBO na TATA NZAMBI, Yamazulu, MPUNGU, TULENDO, NINI na NINI, SOMANLDA, NGAI, MURUNGU, MWENE, NYAGA, THAAYU. Sometimes you have to wait for the ancestors to download the information so you can break it down. So forgive the digression. Meremptah, the 13th son of Ramses II, reported in his 5th year the Meremptah victory still, that Israel, among other nations, was desolated in Canaan. However, the Bible says Israel conquered Canaan 40 years after the Exodus and remained at peace for another 40 years. These numbers and dates are truly unbelievable. Poppycock, so I call it. May the mind be open, may the ears be closed, and may the throat be open to that of which is true. May the tongue be sealed to lies and open to truth. Lie. The conquest occurred in the archaeological age called the Middle Bronze Age. Their history, our truth. Not the Late Bronze Age, Banabeto. The firstborn son of Ramses II, Prince Amen, I can't even pronounce that name correctly, but I'll do my best. Amenhotep chef. Amenhotep chef. Amenhotep chef. Amene. Those that are hated. Amene. Komena, coming from the root mena. Yes, you think Egypt and the Bantu are two distinct people? No, it's the Black-Yomento and the inpouring of the Arabs, Asiatic Arabs, that has caused that delusion. But we were one. They came to this very mountain not far from where I'm doing this broadcast, to receive the truth of our people. And then plagiarize it and imprison our people, that we never get to know the truth. Understand that all your chakra points have to be sealed when you do these things. So forgive my not very Christian presentation, you know. Now, this looks like borderline voodoo. But I enjoy my spirituality, Manavet. I tell you the truth, I enjoy it because on this side, at least, truth is served entirely. The firstborn of Ramses II, the name that makes my tongue ache every time I pronounce it. Died from a severe head wound, not from the plague. And he was well over 30 years of age, not a child, as the Bible would say. So it cannot be him. He was either killed in the battle or accident, as his mummy shows, a head wound. They're there. There were no Philistine cities along the coast of Canaan during this period, as the Bible would have you think. Not for another 400 years. So why did Moses want to avoid cities that did not exist yet? Perhaps because the believers of Athene, those that have been left in Kingipiti, crossed the Nile into the south. But the Hyksos, who are invaders, wandered in the desert. Our people never wandered in the desert for 40 years. Take that to the bank. And have them issue a receipt. And then tell them, yakubibanabantu, mtoto wa kibantu. Say it. Who did they fear, my kings and queens? And with an army of 600,000 men, who did they fear? For the 1,200 men of the chariots of Pharaoh, the great house of the Nisu, all drowned against them in the Sea of Reeds. Why would these huge numbers of 600,000 armed men fear such a small army? Chariots maybe had supernatural weapons unknown to us. And NGAI had to intervene to save the 2 million people. Or alternatively, there was a first exodus, which was the expulsion of a Caucasian race out of Lower Egypt, Memphis, that had come out of Babylon. And then when they had made this influence, comes in the second king and the second expulsion of the lepers or the followers of Athene, of the Ancient of Days, who would naturally have crossed down through Kush, modern day Ethiopia, crossed the Nile, come to the Holy Mountain, and dispersed throughout sub-Saharan Africa. Intermarried with the Khoikhoi and the San people, who would become the Xhosa, the fighting Kabiru would take fort in the mountains. Those in Congo de Antotela, because there were no borders, they would always have a common meeting point. Great Walls of Zimbabwe. Why are we not talking about the Monamutapa Kingdom, the Kingdom of the South, and the Kingdom of the North, those of Kingipiti? Because anything that is sub-Sahara is South. And at this point in our awakening, we also know that the map has been flipped as it is above. So was it made to be below? Establishing these dates, 1 Kings 6:1 enables us to, in the 480th year, after the Israelites had come out of Kingipiti, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign, in the month of quote unquote Ziv, the 2nd month, he began to build the temple. In the spring of 966 BC is established as Solomon's 4th year. This date of 966 BC is determined by 10 astronomically calculated dates. That connect the reigns of biblical kings to the 8 different Assyrian and Babylonian kings. Ashudan, king of Assyria, 763 BC. 10th year of Madokedampos, king of Babylon, 721 BC. 1st year of Nabopolassar, king of Babylon, 621 BC. Which would be the 5th year of King Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, 37th year. Cambyses, king of Persia, 523 BC. The 7th year of King Persia of Darius. King Darius, king of Persia, 502, 20th year. What I find astonishing, Banabeto, is that the biggest icons and prophets and the Bible all had few things in common with Kingipiti, with Egypt. And always Egypt. Joseph lived in Egypt most of his life, educated, worked in the house of Potiphar, an Egyptian army general, and later the royal court. He spoke fluently the tongue of Kingipiti and was buried like one of Kingipiti. He married the daughter of a high priest in Kingipiti, the priest of Heliopolis, also named Potiphar. Maybe all Egyptians were called Potiphar. Moses, born, raised, educated in the royal court and in the district of On, in Heliopolis, in Kingipiti, and was a prince at the royal court, spoke only Egyptian, if you prefer. However, we have no clue what language he actually spoke in the story of the Bible. It seems that only NGAI and Aaron knew. And when I speak of NGAI, it's because I cannot accord any supremacy to any other deity. Not that he had anything to do with it, but I cannot ascribe honor to any other deity besides the SOMANLDA of Bakoko Beto, the mighty one of our ancestors. NGAI, MURUNGU, MWENE, NYAGA, so NINI na NINI SOMANLDA. Our TATA, giving all praise to NZAMBI, witu nangile, la weza jote, la weza vyama. One, two. This man, JC, was raised and lived in Kingipiti. Since the age of 1 till 33 years of age. He speaks fluent Egyptian, Greek, Latin. Who lived under the protection of sanctuary of the temple of Thoth in Hermopolis, and was taught the Hermetic teachings. Yet no mention in the Bible of what happened after Mary escaped into Egypt. We try to find the Gospel of Mary and the early Gnostic books on the early life of JC. But the early life of JC seems to be very mystical. Yet no mention in the Bible of what happened to Mary after they escaped her baby Jesus and headed south till they were given sanctuary in the temple of Tehuti in Hermopolis. They also visited the city of Memphis in Lower Kingipiti, but there was no mention of the city of Alexandria, which was the most civilized city in the world and a center for all philosophical and spiritual schools. That's where the secret schools originated. And also it is clearly stated that NGAI said, and I will bring my son out of Kingipiti. Other prophets usually ran into the arms of Egypt for protection or when they needed food or sanctuary. They also voluntarily sold themselves into slavery when situations were harsh. Deuteronomy 26:68. NGAI will bring you back to Egypt, and you will offer yourselves for sale as slaves and bondswomen there, but there will be no buyer. It was a very costly thing to have and kept a slave in those days. Same as having a maid or housekeeper in Europe today, I tell you very well. Solomon, who is no other than King Amenhotep III, some allude to Mansa Musa. I was not there. I'm not connected to that ancestry. I'm in the house of Kirago, Amonjiro. So you sitting there, you're probably from that house. You've not activated your spiritual gifts and you expect this awakening to pick up. Understand one thing about ancestors. They only teach you what is relevant to your house. And through rites and initiations, they expand you. They give you information concerning other houses, but you have their elaborate ways. You cannot just go interfering with another's house. You have to have gone through all the rites. I tell you, my people, Kiredahu, Nikyo, Gogeraira Derieshiana. It is full of abominations. That is why I will go to the mountain and get ira, that I may cleanse my children. Lie. Thus, King Amenhotep III was known as King Sholomen, as it was in his time that King Gipiti was an imperial power and very peaceful time as well. It was he who had more than 1,000 wives in harem, the description of his palace as described in the Bible. King Gipiti was the country to be in. If you wanted to become learned and wise, then go to King Gipiti. It was the most civilized country of its time. We have many other examples of very famous people who learned and were educated in the temples of King Gipiti, such as Pythagoras, Aristotle. The whole philosophy, ideas, Democritus, and many others is proper. All started in Egypt during the reign of King Amasis, due to his open policy of diplomacy and mutual help to educate the foreign nationals at the famous Egyptian universities. In return for military alliances, the world saw King Gipiti as a great civilization of the world, my people. And these universities at their time were in the equivalent of Oxford, Cambridge, and Harvard. The centers for education were Heliopolis, Memphis, Thebes, and Hermopolis. So Banaveto, too much of anything is poisonous. So by the goal for the KEMBO of TATA and NZAMBI, I hope that next week we might continue to disseminate biblical events and truth vis-a-vis the given history and the history of our people. As always, I say, thy, dada yangai thy, thy, dada yangai thy, thy, dada yangai thy. Nakio kere nyagage deru, kirogo wataira, kirogo. Until next time, makubenjalo ingeta thy.